mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original, 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
And the perspectives I have understands what we must do to recognize the needs of all communities. And I intend to be a president for all people.
There is a guy who takes a second almost assassination attempt and responds to it with grace and good humor. And then there's a woman who is terrified of the American media.
We need answers more than the Secret Service needs money.
Until it does better in accountability and management, it will continue to be short on resources.
Hello, I'm Nicole Killian in Washington, and welcome to America Decides. Former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris are on the campaign trail today, hitting two different battleground states. The vice president spoke at a National Association of Black Journalists forum in Philadelphia. It comes 6 weeks after former President Trump appeared at the organization's national convention in Chicago, where he questioned Harris's racial ethnicity. Meanwhile, Trump is holding a town hall in Flint, Michigan. It's his first public event following Sunday's apparent assassination attempt. Last night, the former president spoke out about the incident and blamed the rhetoric of President Biden and Vice President Harris. CBS News campaign reporter Olivia Rinaldi is traveling with the former president in Michigan, and senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is with the vice president in Pennsylvania. Olivia, I want to start with you. The former president, as we just mentioned, is there in Flint, Michigan. This is his first event since Sunday's second apparent assassination attempt. What is security like at tonight's event?
Yeah, good to be with you, Nicole. Security is looking like it's looked for the past 2 months since the first assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th. There's an increase of officers I noticed coming into the town even. There was a crush of officers directing traffic to one location. You have to go through several checks before you even get into the parking lot. And then once there, you go through a series of screenings. All of our camera gear gets screened extensively. Our laptops get taken out. This is the thorough measures that the Secret Service is going through today, just 2 days after that apparent assassination attempt on Sunday. Now, the Trump campaign says Trump is going to continue his campaign schedule this week, which, as we know, includes a stop tomorrow in Uniondale in New York. That's on Long Island. Then he'll continue to Washington, D.C., where he'll hold a few events on anti-Semitism, and he'll cap out the week in Wilmington, North Carolina. So Trump is appearing to go full steam ahead on this campaign schedule as all these questions swirl about his security presence, whether he'll be getting more from the Secret Service. And just voters I've talked to here today tell me that's exactly what they want to see, Nicole. They want to see more of a security presence around the former president, and their questions around how this could happen to him again, just less than over 2 months since the last one.
The former president is blaming Democrats and their rhetoric for Sunday's incident. His running mate, J.D. Vance, also echoed that sentiment today in Michigan. Let's take a listen.
It's time to say to the Democrats, to the media, to everybody that has been attacking this man and trying to censor this man for going on 10 years, cut it out or you're going to get somebody killed.
Today, the White House rejected those accusations. How is the Trump campaign responding, and can we expect them to continue to play this up despite some of that pushback?
Well, Nicole, tonight is expected to be about the economy and the focus to be on the auto industry. But I suspect just knowing this campaign and covering Donald Trump, that's likely going to be one of the first things he talks about is this apparent assassination attempt. And his campaign is really doubling down that the rhetoric from the Democrats and the Biden administration is leading to this political violence. That is what they're saying on their side, even though the White House is denying it and people are asking to tamp down the rhetoric. They're really pushing forward with that notion, that saying that Trump Trump is a threat to democracy is what is fueling these political attacks against him. So I suspect that Trump will talk about that at some length tonight. He is talking with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, that is his former White House press secretary, and the governor of Arkansas, current governor of Arkansas. They'll be having that conversation behind me in just a short little while.
And Ed, Vice President Kamala Harris addressed the National Association of Black Journalists in Philadelphia. What is she saying about this incident involving the former president?
Well, turns out, Nicole, they spoke this afternoon, and she explained to journalists how that conversation went. Take a listen.
I checked on him to see if he was okay. And I told him what I have said publicly. There's no place for political violence in our country. I am in this election and in this race for many reasons, including to fight for our democracy. And in a democracy, there is no place for political violence. We can and should have healthy debates and discussion and disagreements.
Notably, Harris was asked whether or not she feels safe under Secret Service protection, and she said she does. But she pointed out that there are many Americans who may not feel safe right now, given the rhetoric of former President Trump, given the things that he enacted when he was president and what he's threatening to do again. She specifically called out LGBTQ people, immigrants, and women as the kinds of Americans who may not feel safe right now, given the things that are being said out on the campaign trail or that Donald Trump is proposing to do or has done when he served as president. Nicole.
And, of course, there was a lot of controversy when former President Trump spoke with NABJ. I remember very clearly because I was there. But how did that set the stage for Harris's interview today? And what did she address in this interview? Did we learn anything new?
Well, she faced a few different questions. She's going to probably get some heat for how she answered questions regarding the war in the Middle East, for example, suggesting again that she stands by Israel's right to defend itself, but insisted that there needs to be a resolution to the situation regarding hostages, suggested that there needs to be a ceasefire, said she supports withholding 2,000-pound bombs from Israel, but then struggled to really explain what exactly more she would be able to do to help the Palestinian people. There was also a question about reparations and whether or not she, as president, would ever use executive authority to establish a national commission to explore possibly paying reparations. She suggested no, that it's ultimately up to Congress to do so, and that there are other ways to help the black community across the country, in part, she suggested, by enacting her economic policies. And then she was asked about what President Trump and J.D. Vance and others have said about what happened in Springfield, Ohio, and she gave one of her more spirited answers. Take a listen.
This is not new in terms of where it's coming from. You know, whether it is refusing to rent to people, rent to black families, whether it is taking out a full-page ad in the New York Times against 5 innocent black and Latino teenagers, the Central Park 5, calling for their execution, referring to the first black president of the United States with a lie, birther lies. The American people deserve, and I do believe want, better than this.
So that, again, earned one of the more spirited answers from her. It seemed as if she was anticipating and wanted to talk about her concerns with the rhetoric used and the fact that, as she pointed out, schools in Springfield, Ohio, as you know, Nicole, having been there in recent days, were shut down amid threats. She called out the fact that, at least at some of those schools, it was picture day, and that young students had shown up in their best clothing, all prepared and excited to take their photos, only to have to leave school because of the threats that had been phoned into that community.
Yeah, and they have Ohio State troopers posted outside of some of those schools today in light of those threats. Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much, as well as Olivia Rinaldi. We appreciate both of you for joining us. And a quick programming note, join us early on October 1st at 4 p.m. Eastern for a special vice presidential debate edition of America Decides, live from New York City. CBS News will moderate the debate and bring you coverage all evening long.
All of a sudden, we heard shots being fired in the air, and I guess probably 4 or 5. And it sounded like bullets, but what do I know about that?
That was former President Trump recounting his experience this past Sunday. Next, the new information we're learning about Sunday's apparent assassination attempt. You're streaming America Decides.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
Of we, the people.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
It was almost as if they had practiced this 500 times before. They had him surrounded. He's the protectee. That's how it ought to happen. They were moving him to a faster cart.
That was former President Trump's golf partner, Steve Witkoff, commending the Secret Service. This says more details are coming out about Sunday's apparent assassination attempt. Let's bring in CBS News national correspondent Manny Bajorquez, who is following the latest developments from West Palm Beach. Manny, bring us up to speed on the investigation. What do we know?
Well, we have some new information from our colleague who is on the island of Oahu in Hawaii. That is where the suspect, Ryan Routh, lived, and he reports to us that there are as many as 8 agents, including from the FBI, in his home and around the home in an apparent search for evidence, something that is being called court authorized. So just imagine the scope of this investigation. All the way in Hawaii. He also lived at one point in North Carolina, where we're told that they were speaking with relatives, and also right here in West Palm Beach, where this all played out. Also, a bit of new information from the suspect's family. For the first time, we're hearing from his son, 25-year-old son, who released a quote to CBS News saying that he's a good person and has been a hard worker his whole life. It's saying that definitely he was taken aback, was surprised by what has happened. But prosecutors will be painting a very different picture of Ryan Routh, given the fact that they say that cell phone records indicate that he was potentially lying in wait outside of the golf club in West Palm Beach almost 12 hours and was then discovered to be holding a rifle with a scope. This investigation is still ongoing right now, and potentially more charges could be coming, more than the 2 federal gun charges that he's currently facing.
And what else is law enforcement saying about security, particularly, as you just mentioned, this fact that Routh allegedly was in the area for some 12 hours before this incident took place?
When the news conference that was held yesterday, they referenced not being able to conduct what would be a full sweep ahead of the former president golfing because it was an off-the-record and seemingly last-minute addition to his schedule. That being said, they did have an advanced team going from hole to hole before the president got to those holes, and that is how one of the agents was able to spot the suspect in this case and fire in his direction, getting them to flee. And then he was arrested in Martin County, which is just north of us here.
All right. Manny Bajorquez is in West Palm Beach tonight. Thank you. And we're joined now by our chief Washington correspondent, Major Garrett. And Major, what is your assessment of where things stand right now politically?
Well, thanks for that easy question, Nicole. Where do things stand? Where the American public decides they stand, and it's not a cop-out. I'm not trying to avoid this, but anyone who tries to answer that question can't possibly do that. We have a society right now that finds fault very rapidly and almost reflexively in the other side. Republicans are now beginning to marshal this argument that it is Democrats' rhetoric's fault for what happened on Sunday, when we don't have a clear sense at all of the motive of this individual. We don't have a clear sense, Nicole, of the motive of the shooter in Butler, Pennsylvania. Not absolutely clear, but yet motives are being laid upon both of them, possibly for political purposes, possibly because people would like to reduce the threat environment around former President Trump. I'm all in favor of that. I'm all in favor of reducing the threat environment from members of Congress who are harassed with emails and text messages, as you well know, anyone running for office, governor, senator, and certainly President of the United States. So where we are, we're an anxious country in an atmosphere of very profound political rhetoric and agitation that appears unwilling to forgive or forget. And if I've learned anything about history, societies that do not forgive and do not forget constantly find themselves at each other's throat.
Oh, well, speaking of history, I mean, how did we get here in the sense? I mean, we're talking now about 2 assassination attempts within the span of roughly 2 months. Some people may not remember, but there were 2 attempts on former President Ford's life. You know, how would you say this period compares to that era?
He was president, 1975, September of that month. 2 assassination attempts separated by 17 days in the same state, California. Motives there, not specifically directed at President Ford. Sarah Jane Moore, Lynette Squeaky Fromm, 2 women, both responsible for these attempted assassination attempts. One just wanted to create an atmosphere of revolution in America. One wanted to, and this is a quote, save the trees. Gerald Ford, as President of the United States, was a symbol of something they were trying to challenge, but it wasn't directed at the Republican Party, at Gerald Ford necessarily because of his politics or a speech or something he'd done. And the only reason I bring that up is because sometimes motives in political assassinations in this country are very specific and very political, but oftentimes they are not. They are much more broadly based and about something larger or gaining notoriety. And for that reason, we should learn our history and also not be so quick to assume what's going on right now about these 2 criminals, assailants, one dead in Butler, Pennsylvania, one now in police custody.
And then just very briefly, you know, what do you make of the former president and Senator Vance blaming Democrats and their rhetoric for this? You know, do they have a point? Are both sides to blame, or are they taking this one beat too far?
That's going to be for the American public to decide. I'm not going to arbitrate that. You can, to my point earlier, look at rhetoric from the Democrats about Trump being a threat to democracy, Trump being someone who can never return under any circumstances to the White House. Maybe it's Trump who has to be sidelined or something. And imagine how someone could read into that rhetoric something that could possibly lead them in this direction. But I don't need to tell you, Nicole, nobody in this audience needs to be reminded of things that former President Trump has said in this campaign and while president and as a candidate in 2015 and 2016, upon which equal inferences to violence could be easily construed. If nobody wants to forgive or forget, all we'll do is blame one another for rhetoric that's out of control and creates a dangerous environment when both sides have some reckoning to do with their own rhetoric.
All right, Major Garrett, we appreciate your historic insight and analysis as always. Ballots are already being sent to voters in some states. Next, CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys guides us through how to navigate the polls from now until November. You're streaming America Decides.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate. Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 Hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
With just 49 days until Election Day, what is the best way to look at polls and see how they capture likely voters? We're joined now by CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, good to see you. You know, we talk a lot about turnout and polls, so what should people watch for when they see polls?
Hey there, Nicole. Right, as those ballots you mentioned start going out, and then eventually the early voting will start taking place, in-person early voting. People start returning those mail ballots. The registered voters we sometimes talk about in polls will become likely voters, which we always talk about in polls, and then they will become voters. And that process is going to work out this way. First of all, note this, 2/3 of people who are eligible to vote usually vote in a presidential election. That was actually the most recent high watermark in 2020. So right away, you see, not everyone is going to turn out. And then take a look at this. When you start to see polls that look at registered voters who will say that they definitely vote, those numbers have been approaching and hitting about 90%. So in that sense, it's most registered voters, but it's not everyone. So take a look at an example. I'm going to jump ahead to this and show you, if you just ask registered voters, how likely are you to vote? You will find, as we do here, that a large number of them say they definitely will. A poll will incorporate that by looking at how many people who've said that they were definitely going to vote in the past have in fact voted. You can return and talk to them after an election. You can look on the voter file and match them up from public information. All of that, let's suppose, and I'll just use this as an example, but it's close to the way it is. Let's suppose that 95% of people who've said in the past that they'll definitely vote actually do. That person, all else equal, will get a likely voter weight in the poll that represents 95%. And then we'll incorporate voter history and other factors. Takeaway is this, Nicole. You start to see polls that have likely voters, which they should now, and know that differences in polls may be from how those pollsters modeled the likely electorate. And that's a fancy way of saying it all comes back down to turnout.
Yeah, I feel like we're getting a crash course on polling right now, but just to drill down on this a little deeper, how is this going to change as people start voting early and absentee?
Well, number one, you can see, and many states report in real time, when votes have come back. You don't see them counted, but if a voter has returned a mail ballot, has voted early in person, that person, when they subsequently take a poll, will be given, sort of credit for that, if you will, and they will be a voter. Know this, too, as these ballots start going out. Most of the nation will have voted by the time we get to Election Day. You got 46% last time that voted by mail, might be around that again. You get another quarter who are going to vote early in person. When we get to that quote-unquote Election Day on November 4th, most of the ballots that are going to be cast in this election will already be there waiting to be counted. Nicole.
All right, Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much. A new poll has Vice President Kamala Harris leading former President Trump in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. Our political panel joins us next to discuss the new numbers. You're streaming America Decides.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024? Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
First of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question so in such a horrible manner. First question.
First of all, let me just say it is good to be with the National Association of Black Journalists, and I thank you for the work you do and that your members do every day.
You just heard the very beginning of former President Trump and Vice President Harris's responses to the first questions that they were asked by reporters from the National Association of Black Journalists. Harris spoke with the group today. The former president took questions back in July. Let's dig into this a bit further with Mara Gillespie and Jaime Moore. Mara formerly served as an advisor to former Republican House Speaker John Boehner and former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Jaime formerly served as the director for the Office of the Democratic National Committee Chair. And thanks to both of you for being here. Obviously, kind of a different vibe for both Harris and Trump before NABJ. But Maura, I want to start with you because I know Republicans in particular have been very critical of the vice president for not doing enough interviews today. She sat down with 3 journalists from NABJ. Is this enough to kind of quell that criticism, and did she meet the mark?
I think that you're going to see that criticism continue because it is low-hanging fruit for a lot of Republicans to use that as a target about, she's been avoiding the press, she ran for X number of weeks and didn't talk to the press. But I think that her ability to hit back by doing well and not getting flustered will serve her well in the weeks leading up to November. But I don't think they're going to stop hearing that criticism from Republicans that she has largely avoided because of the fear of making a misstep, any major gaps because of her past and previous experiences with the press and with doing one-on-one interviews. So while they have a reason to doubt her, I think thus far probably coming up a little empty there.
And Jaime, during this discussion today in Philadelphia, and our Ed O'Keefe was there and brought this up, the vice president also addressed the controversial situation right now in Springfield, Illinois. Let's take a listen to her response there.
It's a crying shame, literally. What's happening to those families, those children in that community, not to mention what is happening in terms of, look, you say you care about law enforcement resources being put into this because of these serious threats that are being issued against a community that is living a productive, good life before this happened.
And obviously we know, and I just got back from Springfield, there have been a number of bomb threats there, all based on these debunked claims about Haitian migrants. In terms of Democrats, how are they trying to counter if you will, in terms of what we're hearing from the former president and J.D. Vance?
Yeah, Nicole, thank you for having me. And I just want to say that Jaron, Tonya, and Eugene did a great job today in Philadelphia. But I think the vice president is leading the messaging on this. You're going to hear this from a lot of Democrats. It's very, very unsafe for a lot of families for President Trump and J.D. Vance to talk about these sort of things. There was a Haitian immigrant on TV today that talked about that her kids could not go to school because they were so afraid to go to school. And that's something that we shouldn't have to talk about it in America. We've all been there. We've been through Jim Crow. We've been through Asian hate. We've been through Islamophobia and all these different things that are trying to divide us. And so I think the Democrats are going to try to talk about bringing us together, while also talking about the rhetoric that they believe President Trump and J.D. Vance have perpetuated.
And Mar, I also want to ask you about this issue as well, because J.D. Vance also continues to double down on these false claims and did so again today at an event in Michigan. While I was in Ohio, had the opportunity to speak with Governor Mike DeWine one-on-one. Let's take a little bit of a listen to that conversation. Have you reached out directly to J.D. Vance about his comments?
No.
Do you intend to?
No.
Why not?
Well, look, I watched what he said. You've heard what I had to say about that.
So you're okay with him continuing to perpetuate these claims?
Look, I don't speak for him. He's got to run his own campaign. Donald Trump has to run his campaign. Vice President has to run her campaign. I'm not running for president. I'm governor of Ohio. I'm concerned about Springfield. I'm concerned about the state of Ohio.
So I'm curious what you make of his response, particularly because the governor has been very outspoken on this, calling these debunked claims garbage, yet at the same time, he's not going to tell J.D. Vance to stop making them.
I think it's honestly with Ohio, and he's walking a fine line, but he's also doing his job. He's looking out for the people of Springfield because those are his constituents as governor. And yes, J.D. Vance was the senator, or still is the senator, but J.D. Vance is on his own trajectory. And I think what the governor of Ohio is saying here is, I'm focused on what's happening in Springfield because it's not okay. And he has made that very clear. And the responsibility at the end of the day falls on J.D. Vance, and it falls on Donald Trump for continuing this conspiracy theory that is hurting a community of people who have not only have they added numbers to jobs there, but they've also added numbers to the churches. And if for the MAGA far right wing who purports to be true Christians, shouldn't you be glad to see that this community, where a lot of the churches there, I mean, CBS did the story on it, where they saw numbers declining and couldn't get people to come back into the doors. And then the Haitian migrants came in and contribute to the churches. They're part of the community, and to demonize them in any way because of a story that he saw on the internet is just the dangerous slippery slope that we are seeing so many people fall down, and it's coming from hate. And at the end of the day, like, we as a society cannot operate if we continually come from hate and fear. It's destructive.
And Nicole, look, I'll add to this. If you've noticed a pattern here, so the governor of Georgia, governor of Texas, governor now of Ohio, Republican governors refuse to get behind some of these claims that have been made by President Trump and J.D. Vance. And so they're putting their own people in a place where they have to play political gymnastics. These governors want to care for their people, but Donald Trump and J.D. Vance keep putting crazy topics on the table.
I also want to talk to you, Jaime, about some new polls out today from USA Today and Suffolk University that show Vice President Harris now leading the former president in the state of Pennsylvania, as well as two critical bellwether counties. It seems the common denominator there is potentially among female voters, but just want to get your take there on those new numbers, because we know that race is extremely tight.
Look, Nicole, we've talked about this before. Pennsylvania is a must-win state for Kamala Harris. And she knows that. If you recognize where she's been in Pennsylvania 12 times just this year. And so some of the counties that I really want to watch, Allegheny County, Erie County, Chester County, Lehigh, Berks, those counties are going to really show where she stands and where Donald Trump stands. And so I do think that these numbers are real. I do think there are a lot of things that are happening in Pennsylvania and around the country and other states as well. I've traveled over the last few weeks. It's sort of like 2008 when you see non-traditional Democratic voters wearing Harris Walls merch. That camouflage hat is everywhere in Pennsylvania. And so I do think that she's taking it very seriously. These numbers are real, but we'll see how much they hold. But those bellwether counties are going to be really important for her.
All right, Jaime Moore, Maura Gillespie, thanks as always for joining us.
Thank you, Nicole.
It's fair to say Charlie XCX nearly broke the internet this summer when she declared Kamala is brat. Well, last week, Taylor Swift's high-profile endorsement of the vice president drew the ire of former President Trump. And now another Grammy-winning artist is backing the Harris Walls ticket.
They are fighting to protect our reproductive freedom, our planet, and our democracy. Vote like your life depends on it, because it does.
That was Billie Eilish alongside her brother and producer Phineas Eilish. They announced their endorsement on National Voter Registration Day and encouraged supporters to make sure they're all set to cast their ballots. Senate Republicans today blocked legislation designed to protect access to in vitro fertilization, or IVF, across the nation. 51 senators voted in favor of the package and 44 against. It needed 60 votes to move forward. Only 2 Republican lawmakers, Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, backed the package. My fellow CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane is with us now. And Scott, it seems like we're watching a rerun of a movie here, but why did this package fail to advance?
Oh, this sequel was just like the original, too. There wasn't even a change of characters or change in plot line. What happened here was the U.S. Senate Democrats pledged to have another one of these votes on their bill to codify federal protections for IVF. It's a bill Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth has pushed hard, and they had a similar vote earlier this year, as you know, and Republicans intervened to block it. The same thing happened here, and it's the same dispute ahead of the election. Democrats like their bill on IVF, saying it codifies federal protections, helps expand insurance coverage, prevents any state from unilaterally stopping IVF treatment from happening. Republicans prefer their plan, which allows for health savings account reimbursements, a little less expansion of insurance rates, but they also would pull back federal Medicaid money from any state that withdrew IVF protections. They say the Democrats' bill is an overreach. All this was predictable on Monday morning, but the vote happened Tuesday afternoon, and it was no coincidence. This is happening during the home stretch of an election in which Democrats want this to be part of the political terrain.
And the vice president released a statement saying, in part, quote, Republicans in Congress have once again made clear that they will not protect access to the fertility treatments many couples need to fulfill their dream of having a child. But former President Trump has said he adamantly supports access to IVF. So what's the disconnect here with some Republican lawmakers?
Well, there's a couple different issues here. One of the threads that I think you've noticed as well as anybody is that there are some battleground Senate races where Democrats would like to put this in their campaign ads, would like to amplify this going into November. So what the top of the ticket says is one thing, what the second tier of the ticket says is potentially quite different. What's more, there's a different bill in the U.S. House. In fact, there are multiple IVF bills. Seemingly everybody has some variant of an IVF bill in the U.S. House. And there are Republicans signing on to a Democratic-authored IVF bill in the House. So the politics change further when you go further down the ballot, where you actually have some bipartisan clusters forming, though nothing that's going to pass into law. This is truly, in addition to being remarkably important and remarkably impactful, a politically curious issue, the way it's manifesting itself in the home stretch to November.
And speaking of another movie we've both seen before, talk of a potential government shutdown. We know Speaker Mike Johnson said today that the House will vote Wednesday on a plan that he and other House Republican leaders want to move forward with to try to avert a potential shutdown. But as you know, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has already said this is dead on arrival. We saw the Speaker pull this bill earlier this month. Why is he moving forward with it?
No, they write these schedules in invisible ink, don't they? It just kind of disappears at the last second. It's on the calendar for tomorrow. We'll see if it stays there. Maybe Republicans can muster enough votes to pass this on party lines. It's a big maybe, but they're bullish on their prospects. This is the first chess move in a very accelerated game of chess, and it doesn't appear the team making the first move is going to win this match. They're going to get a House passed bill that extends through March 28th, includes that SAVE Act to make unlawful any undocumented migrants voting in federal elections. You know, Democrats won't have it. They say that bill is redundant. It's already illegal and doesn't really happen. But the Senate's going to have to counterpunch here at some point, and they'll do so likely in the next 7 to 10 days after the House moves, if the House moves tomorrow.
All right. Well, Scott MacFarlane, we know you'll be covering it, as will I. Thank you so much. Well, it feels like lawmakers are having to say violence has no place in our politics is becoming more and more routine. Up next, we will speak with a Georgia official who faced threats after the 2020 election. You're streaming America Decides.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are. Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
There is no, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, those of you who know me, many of you do, no place in political violence in America. None. Zero. Never.
Violence in American politics is prevalent today, and both Democrats and Republicans have been targeted. The shooting of Congressman Steve Scalise, threats against election workers after the 2020 election, the January 6th assault on the U.S. Capitol, the attack against Paul Pelosi, and the attempts on former President Donald Trump's life. Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger is here with us now. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for joining us. And I first just want to start off with the moment that we're in, particularly days after a second assassination attempt against former President Trump. What is your reaction to that? And as someone who has faced threats after the 2020 election, how concerned are you about the prospects of political violence in this election?
Well, obviously, I condemn political violence of any type, any time. In fact, our founders really always believed that we should, work out our differences, at the ballot box. And once you pick your leaders, then they go up to their capitals and they work on these issues and make sure that they, listen to both sides, but then they call a vote. But we do it peacefully, and that's the American way, and that's the way it should be.
Last night, Vice Presidential candidate J.D. Vance was there in Atlanta where he blamed Democrats' rhetoric for the assassination attempt. Is that fair criticism?
Well, I think that everyone is held accountable for their own actions. And so I think people need to be held responsible for what they do. And I think, though, we can always have positive a constructive dialogue and debate the issues and the important issues that our country faces, or at the state level, what our state would face. I think that's the most productive way going forward. I think people are looking for solutions, and they're looking for people that can actually deliver effective, cost-effective solutions for them.
You know, this week there were several suspicious packages that were sent to secretaries of state in 6 states containing white powder. They did not appear to be hazardous, but kind of as we talk about this threat environment, what types of precautions are you taking to keep your office and election officials safe?
Well, we had Narcan that was actually intercepted before it was mailed out to Fulton County earlier in the year. All 159 of our election offices throughout the state that receive ballots, receive any type of mail, we distributed Narcan to them through our Department of Community Health and Governor Kemp's support. And so we're grateful for the governor coming alongside us to make sure that we keep every election office safe. You know, we don't know what people could be shipping in the mail, but we are prepared for fentanyl and looking out for any other type of foreign substance. It's just another thing that we've put on our to-do checklist just to be aware of. It's one of those unfortunate things, but we deal with it and we move forward. We do our job.
And in terms of the mechanics of the election itself, you have pledged a smooth process, but the state election board there in Georgia has implemented some new rules to make it harder to certify the results, and they're considering additional changes later this week. Could this gum up the works in November?
Well, everything that I've done since 2019, since taking office, is to work making sure we have free, fair, and fast elections. And so when they start adding their additional procedures, it's actually going to slow things down. But at the end of the day, the following Monday after the Tuesday election, it is in state law that you shall, every county shall, certify their election results. So that is something that they have to do. It's in black letter law. But what I've been working for is making sure we have fast results, fast reporting of the results, because that helps voters, really know what the race is going to look like. We have all the early ballots for absentee, and also the early voting have to be reported no later than 1 hour after the polls close, which is typically 7 p.m. So by 8 p.m., 65 to 70% of all the votes that have been, exercised during this election will be reported. And we think that's a good thing.
Several lawsuits, however, have been filed to challenge these new rules. I mean, ultimately, do you think they'll stick?
Well, at the end of the day, if any of the state election board rules aren't in perfect alignment with state law, then they'll be thrown out. And that's what a judge will have to determine.
And as we get closer to the start of voting, I believe early voting starts there in Georgia in less than a month. What other steps are you taking to get ready?
Well, today was the first day for mailing out our UOCAVA ballots. They went out starting today. And then that'll then be followed by starting to send out absentee ballots to voters that have already got their applications in. And so that is the next step. And then we have early voting starting in the middle of October. So the counties have, right here in DeKalb County, they're doing poll worker training today. So I saw a whole bunch of people sitting at the rows and tables doing poll worker training. And all the counties have been working hard on poll worker training and making sure we're adequately staffed for the 17 days early voting we have, then also the election day results, and also the election day 14-hour days that we'll be putting in.
All right. Well, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Democrats currently hold a very slim majority in the U.S. Senate. Coming up, we will break down some of the races that could change the balance of power in the upper chamber. You are streaming America Decides.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
This really
is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense?
Have you
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good? Mm-hmm. Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
So if we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
When people say who's first to get in the morning, that would be me. Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way.
We'll take you places, we teach you new things, and we make you feel like, you know, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
As Democrats work to stay in the White House, they're also hoping to keep or grow their slight majority in the Senate. Some believe that battle may be determined by the outcome of one race in Montana. Democratic Senator Jon Tester is facing a tough challenge from Republican Tim Sheehy. Trump has endorsed the combat veteran and has appeared on the campaign trail with him in Montana. Our own Hunter Woodall joins us now in our D.C. studio. And Hunter, you know, in terms of this race, it's really fascinating because the Cook Political Report, I think just a couple of days ago, moved this race to lean Republican, which normally wouldn't be shocking in a red state like Montana, but this is significant.
Absolutely. I mean, and you look at the Senate map for Democrats, this is a difficult year for them. They have a very thin majority right now, and they're likely to lose a race in West Virginia that they currently have. Montana's a next seat up that could be a challenge for them. Jon Tester's won in this state before, but it's still a tough dynamic, it's a tough race, and he has a Republican challenger, Tim Sheehy, who has run a race that has really put Tester, on his heels in a way of, okay, how am I going to try and win a state that the Democratic nominee is likely to lose in a major way? So trying to break away from the top of the ticket and show that distinctiveness is a major challenge, and in a year like this could be the seat that really decides who has control of the Senate. Yeah, I was going to say how much of this is make or break, particularly for Democrats. Well, and that's the part that continues to be interesting because let's say, Jon Tester loses in Montana. Really, the map gets very difficult because Democrats are looking at Texas and Florida as potential pickup opportunities, but that's more or less because of how tough the map is everywhere else. And those are tough incumbents there, tough incumbent Republicans. Defeating them is really going to be a challenge in this dynamic. And of course, another race that we're watching closely that is also quite competitive, to the surprise of some, is the state of Maryland and that Senate contest. What do we know? What's the current state of play? Absolutely. So, this Maryland Senate seat, normally this would be a safe, reliably blue seat. The incumbent's not running for re-election. Angela Alsobrooks is the Democratic candidate. She won a very competitive primary. a few months back, but she's facing off with the former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan. Hogan's, not quite a moderate Republican, but he's more pragmatic. He's distanced himself from Donald Trump in a big way. And this race has been close because Republicans see if they want to win in a blue state like Maryland, it's going to take somebody like Larry Hogan to potentially do that. This could mean Democrats having to spend more money and time in Maryland at a time when they really don't want to be worrying too much about that seat.
But that being said, I mean, as you said, he's a popular former governor. Why do you think this race, though, is still so tight?
Well, it was interesting. I was in Annapolis on primary day when voters were going to, cast their votes for this gubernatorial primary, or excuse me, Senate primary. And when you talk to voters, they have a warm memory of Hogan as governor, but there is that concern of, okay, they sent him to the governor's office in Maryland. Do they really want to send him to the Senate where he's going to vote with Republicans? Again, it's a deep blue state. That's going to be an interesting dynamic to watch in the coming months.
All right, well, two very interesting Senate races. More to come. Hunter Woodall, thanks so much. And finally, two stranded astronauts are not letting the distance between Earth and outer space stop them from getting their I voted stickers. And no, there isn't a rocket on its way to the International Space Station with paper ballots. Election officials in Texas worked with NASA to send password-protected PDFs to astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams. Once they cast their vote, it will be processed just like any other ballot. The Texas legislature passed a bill in 1997 allowing Americans in space to cast their vote in the state. And that does it for us today. We will be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for September 17th, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. The Attorney General says the executive branch will spare no resources to hold the responsible parties accountable for lapses connected to the assassination attempt of former President Trump. We'll have the